That makes it.
Kylie, you ready? Okay.
That.
Good evening. I will call the September 12th, 2024 Stanton City Council meeting to order. Is there a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda?
So moved. Vice Mayor Darby, I move to amend the agenda and add item F, appointment of the City of Stanton Fire Chief.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Kesker, you can call the roll.
Mr. Arrowood.
Aye.
Miss Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Miss Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Campbell.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Now I call for a motion to approve the meeting agenda as amended.
Vice Mayor Darby, I move to approve the agenda as amended.
A second?
Okay. There's a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda as amended. Counselor Woods?
Yes.
Mr. Kesker, you can call the roll.
Mr. Campbell.
Aye.
Miss Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Miss Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Now we got through that housekeeping. If everyone would stand with me and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Thank you. This evening, Mr. Campbell will provide an invocation for us.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Darby. So with yesterday being the anniversary of 9/11, I'd like to take an opportunity for remembrance and reflection this evening in council chambers. It's hard to believe that we are approaching a quarter of a century later, but for everyone in the room that is old enough to remember, and I'm sure most, if not all, are able to recall in vivid memory the exact moment you learned of the tragic events that were unfolding that morning 23 years ago. And with that, the remembrance of lives lost, the bravery on display, the ultimate sacrifice of so many, and a nation uniting in sorrow to come together, to rebuild, to move forward, but always remembering. Our annual remembrance events at both a national and local level serve as an opportunity to teach our younger generations so that we may never forget. I would like to thank city staff for sharing on our city social media account yesterday's moving 9/11 tribute from the Corps of Cadets at Mary Baldwin University's Virginia Women's Institute for Leadership, noting that most, if not all, of the current cadets participating in the ceremony would have been born after 9/11. To even something as simple as wear your red, white, and blue day at McSwain Elementary to provide that opportunity for parents to discuss the significance of the day with their children. Therefore, in the spirit of remembrance, please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Okay, as you can see, Mayor Claffey is not with us this evening, so there will not be a mayor's report. But if any other counselors have things they'd like to report on, now's the time. So please feel free.
Well, Madam Vice Mayor, it's been a little while since our last meeting, so I think we've all been to a lot of things. But let's see, a couple weeks ago, there was the opening of the Lewis Street Transit Hub. A number of us were at. That was a good and very warm event as well. Almost melted, but it looks great, and it's good to have it back where it usually is, where the buses usually go. See, we also had the dedication of the Woodrow Wilson Presidential Library Visitor Center this last Thursday as well. It's looking really nice and polished over there. Worth another visit if you haven't been in a while, like I hadn't. And let's see, R. Smith I was able to go to the opening for the Crozet Tunnel construction exhibit on that. They have a lot of really cool original artifacts from that as well. So definitely worth a visit if you can get by.
Thank you, Counselor Airwood. Anyone else?
I'll share that last week, Counselor Woods, Counselor Edwards, and I were able to attend the Saul Housing Summit, where we were focusing on actually developing working group action items to come up, take the data we've collected, this group has collected over the past year, and actually put it to work and start coming up with some action items that the localities can use to actually start making a difference. Very well attended, and it's encouraging to see the momentum keep carrying forward. I even assigned myself some homework, so I'm working on a little activity now for the group, and we've already set our next meetings for next month.
Anyone else? I will,
Yeah, well, go ahead.
okay, I will share that, along with the Transit Hub, grand open ribbon cuttings, and the Woodrow Wilson, gift shop dedication and grand opening, I, also, along with, Council Robertson and Council Arrowood and Mayor Claffey, attended, dedication at St. Francis, Catholic Church, and it was, if you haven't
Unbelievable.
seen it, you need to go. It is beautiful, and it was very nice. And I have one more thing, but if you have something, Mark, I'll let you go.
Well, we need to get this on to, for us to vote on.
Okay, well, let me do one thing
Yeah.
first. I would like to take a moment, just to, express our heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of retired City Sheriff Sidney E. Trott Jr. A lot of folks know him as Eddie, who passed away over the weekend. He was born in Staunton, attended Staunton City Schools, graduated from the Augusta Military Academy, attended Randolph-Macon, and he served with Augusta County Sheriff's Department from around 1975 until 1991, and then served as the sheriff for the city of Staunton for roughly 9 years, retiring in 2000. And a memorial service will be held tomorrow at 11 a.m. at Henry Funeral Home. And so I would like us just to take a moment and remember him for the dedicated service that he gave the city of Staunton. So. Thank you. Now, Council Robertson.
What I need to get onto the floor is that the nominations committee actually met yesterday as well, but that will be what we decided will be coming up in 2 weeks. But we also met on August the 28th, 2024, and we would like to make the following motion. This name keeps on coming up. To appoint Terry Holmes to the Economic Development Authority to fill the unexpired term of Ron Garber, ending January 31st, 2027. To reappoint Sarah Holberg to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee for a 2-year term beginning September the 1st, 2024, and ending on August 31st, 2026. And to reappoint Mr. William Willett to Capsol for a 2-year term beginning September the 1st, 2024, and ending on August 31st, 2026. That's all I have.
Thank you. Coming from committee, it does not need a second. So, Mr. Kesker, if you would call the roll.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Miss Woods,
Aye.
Miss Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to item A of the regular meeting agenda, which is the consent agenda. And so per procedure memorandum number 14, it is the policy of the city council to have routine, non-controversial items placed on a consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda will be voted on in one motion. If separate discussion of an item is requested by any member of council, that item shall be removed and considered separately at the end of the regular meeting agenda. Do any council members desire to remove any item from the consent agenda to be placed on the regular meeting agenda for separate consideration? No, ma'am. Okay, hearing none, I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented. Or I should say, Madam Vice Mayor, I'm sorry.
Thank you. We have a motion for the approval of the consent agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Kesker, you can call the roll.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay. Now we will have an update on the Queen City Mischief and Magic Festival. Ms. Beauregard.
I'd like to introduce Sarah Lynch, who will give us an update on what we can expect in a couple of weeks when the ninth Queen City Mischief and Magic takes place on the 28th and 29th.
Yes.
Okay,
Does this thing work? Okay.
does work.
I'm generally loud enough, but you may or may not know, it is the year of the dragon, and we are planning to celebrate it on 16 blocks of downtown Staunton in a couple weeks. I brought a couple things to share with you guys from, just kind of swag and to explain. Every year we pick a theme, and this year it's the dragon, and it kind of coincided with Chinese New Year on accident, and it's worked well, so we're going to go with that for a while. Another thing that we do every year for anyone that hasn't participated or been in this town or adjacent while it's going on is we try to provide something for an activity for our guests. So what we did trading playing cards one time. So for a few years, they could go to 60 different places and get a different playing card and put together a deck. This year, as inspired by Taylor Swift and all the trends, we're going to give out a bead at many different locations. Once these wizards who are very into reading and studious get all their beads, they can make 2 phrases and 2 bracelets. I sat at Bosch today and made each of you a bracelet with a secret phrase. This will not be known until after the event and everybody gets it together. I'm pretty excited to see what people come up with because we have 2 phrases. You guys will see one of them. But I do believe that these people will come up with some other creative things once they get all their beads together. So I'm going to hand these out to you all. This is one of the things, this is one of my firm beliefs about magic in this town. And I'm going to make Brad Arrowwood hand out shirts.
Oh,
yes.
It's our logo and our Virginians for Magic logo.
We are from.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sarah.
Thank you.
I'll make you
Thank
into 2 lists. So I brought dragons here on this lovely display that one of our many dedicated volunteers. It's a totally volunteer-run festival, which is impossible for a ton of people to believe, including Warner Brothers. So we started in 2016 when the kind of first book in many years came out. It was adjacent to the series. And I heard about it coming out. I'd been reading these books to my son for a few years after the last one had come out. And the whole time reading it to my son, thought, God, Staunton has everything that these books have. We have a train station, we have a tiny little building in between other buildings, a clock, all the things in the books. And we kind of seem quaint and European too. And I always lamented the fact that the series ended before I understood this and we could never do this event. So once I heard the book was coming out, I called Puffer Bellies and asked them to join me. And they are always the voice of reason and set some minimums of participation, which was just 10 merchants being involved. and we had 50, and we had 5,000 wizards or more show up, and we just became sort of the magic capital of the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, or the Eastern Seaboard. I don't know. I do honestly believe it's the largest festival of its type in the world now. For a while, we were rivaled or surpassed by one in Philadelphia, but they quit that before COVID at Chestnut Hill. I'm going to get into some boring details about what happens over the weekend. But if you've attended, Brad comes and helps every year, you'll know you can hardly move for all the blocks of Beverly. And now we've grown up Central, past Silver Line, down to the wharf. We're changing where Redbeard and Ciders is into Refreshment Alley. We're going to have a misting tent there from DCCU. Sunspots is involved, the train, of course. So over the years, we've perfected the flow of traffic. I know it's not easy for people who live here to get around downtown that weekend, but I think we've got it sort of down to a science where people coming into downtown can go around Middlebrook, down Frederick relatively easy, and then out the north end on Lewis. Unfortunately for visitors, when they get over there, they get kind of lost because it's tricky to navigate back unless you know the sneaky way over Sears Hill. I met this morning with the tourism office just in this back hallway. I brought postcards with our dragon year. It's Mischief and Magic and Dragons, oh my. We have handed out about 30 or mailed about 30,000 of these this year. We are now in the visitor center for the first time. This year feels like a different year because it's our second year of enjoying a close financial bond with Virginia Tourism Corporation, and they grant us their festivals and events grant every year for the last couple of years. So we are now in all their welcome centers with map cards, and that's been a really great experience, just having them as a partner. Before them was the city of Staunton, and you guys have used many resources and tireless hours of police and fire and public works, Parks and Rec, and it's really appreciated. Thank you guys. And it's not just appreciated by me and my neighbors who sell a million owls and whatever. The people who come to this town, like, they identify Staunton as their second hometown. They come here for Small Business Saturday and they arrive and they don't cause any problems, and they're really patient and kind and sweet. And there'll be 500 people abreast at the shuttle lot waiting patiently, and they'll let somebody with a kid who has to potty go ahead of them onto the shuttle. We couldn't have picked, on accident or not, a better crowd to welcome enthusiastically to our town. As I was saying, this morning was tourism, and the Kelly Williams from BTC came as our speaker, and they had posted 3 days ago their reel from QCMM last year with a new voiceover addressing it as this is what happened last year and is about to happen again. And they've had almost 400,000 views in about 3 days. So we're pretty excited. Last year when they posted from the festival, they had 100,000 views in like 12 hours, which is like 10 times what they normally see on a great event. So it gets a lot of attention and it's nice. The last thing I was going to say, and I'm open to questions. I'm sure everybody who hasn't been has them. It sounds like the craziest thing that happens in the world. But I joke every year. I get to talk to Virginia Living's coming this year. We just did 2 magazines in Northern Virginia, the Arlington magazine and the Bethesda magazine. And I still, though it is a very hard thing to do, and it's 6 months of my life outside of work, it is my favorite thing I do. And I tell these people as we come to this phase, like a month, 2 weeks out, it feels like the scene in Cinderella where she's walking and the dress just forms in front of her, because every time I turn around, I'm learning about something else cool that someone else is doing downtown. We have this year 160 keys on our map, which means about 160 participating businesses, nonprofits, exhibits, things for the visitor to see. Chip Clark, I don't know if you guys know him. I'm sure he's shown up. He is fully on board and helping us put fun things in all of his windows and buildings and basements. And, you know, it's the magic that is this town where someone thinks of something and there's an army of people waiting to help you make it happen. It definitely huge credit goes to the city, the Virginia Tourism Commission, the 30 people that help me all year long. You know, I think 8 or 9 departments meet monthly up in your office with us, Leslie, and we just get the infrastructure down and then it all gets filled in by hundreds, literally hundreds of people who are eager to make it better, bigger, nicer, more fun for our tourists. So I did learn that we have 200 volunteers already signed up between characters and prefects. We have almost 100 characters. Fishburne is coming with like 30 cadets to be the Durmstrang guards of the bank. And I wanted to point out we still have some shifts available. And I have this cool little dragon on my shoulder. We will give all of our volunteers a cool little dragon. The first 100 or so get a gold dragon. And then after that, we have colors. But there are just all these little Easter eggs. If you guys know what those are, an Easter egg, you know, it's like a surprise all over the town. So anybody that buys one of these dragons, if they see a character and everything lines up just right, the character will have a charm that, like Ron Weasley will have little rat charms. And if he happens to have them on him, we're not guaranteeing anybody anything, but it's very likely you could leave with 15 charms on your dragon when you go. And I feel like that's really cool magic and it's not on the screen. It's not in front of, you know, it's not a digital device. People are wandering around and looking for the cool, fun, sneaky surprises and magical things. And it's going to be bigger and better than ever this year. And next year's our 10th anniversary. So we're going to try to outdo ourselves again. So I don't know if I'm just presenting or if there are questions. Anybody have any questions?
Questions, but it sounds like it's just going to be fabulous. So thank you so much.
You're
for all
welcome.
your
I hope you
work.
come. It'll
Going to
be,
bring us good weather that week.
I hope so. That was, you know, I had a bunch of data numbers I immediately forgot once I got them from this microphone. I know last year, which was our least attended festival, we had Zydeco on board and I was so excited to see the numbers. We did have over 10,000 visitors on Sunday. And when they say visitors, they have to have come more than 50 miles and they have to have allowed tracking on either their device or their credit card somewhere along the line in a checkbox or whatever. So I would guess that's an underestimate,
What
but
was it for the previous year? Do you know, like total?
15 that then we were like being courted by Zydeco and tourism. And so we were allowed to pick one day. So they had 15,000 individual devices, credit cards, trackable dots, like data points.
Sure.
For the Saturday of the festival in 2022.
And that wouldn't catch anybody, Harrisonburg, Lexington, Wayne.
Charlottesville. I mean, most of Charlottesville is closer than 50 miles. So yeah. It's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Thank you for everything you've done.
It's my pleasure, for real. I mean, October 1st, I'll be like, don't bother me, I'm sleeping. But
Well, thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. You're
Thank you
welcome.
for being here, Sarah.
Yes.
Thank you for our t-shirts too.
Yes.
Oh yeah, you're
That's
welcome.
great.
Sorry I made you a Slytherin. I think you're the other
Am I a
green.
Slytherin?
Well, whatever I could find.
Are you a Slytherin? It's all
The
good.
green shirt.
It's all good. And oh yeah, that's right. It's okay. I'll deal with it.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And
I'm gonna go keep planning.
yeah, that sounds
Thank
great.
We'll see you
Sounds
soon.
great. Okay, the next item on our agenda this evening is item C, which is consideration of resolution establishing the percentage of relief at 33% for purposes of the Personal Property Tax Relief Act. Ms. Beauregard.
Maggie Reagan, our Commissioner of Revenue, is here this evening.
Good evening, Vice Mayor Darby and members of council. And as you know, every September I come before you to establish the percentage of personal property tax relief offered by the Commonwealth as part of the agreement that was put forth in 2004 and started in 2006. This is the amount of money that comes into the city from the state to subsidize a portion of the personal property tax on motor vehicles. And this year, I'm asking you to once again, as we did last year, approve that rate at 33%. So the rate is unchanged from last year. And the reason for that is because although we have approximately 250 more vehicles than we had last year, the used vehicle prices or values are trending in the downward as they should. As you all know, for the last 3 years, they trended upwards. So we're kind of moving back into normalcy as far as those values are concerned. So the overall value of the entire fleet for the city is virtually unchanged. It's only a difference in tax from last year to this year of about $24,000 total. So I'm asking you to keep that at the 33% for this year. And as I do every year, I have your interesting facts about vehicles.
Mark looks forward to this.
I love this
Yes.
part.
So this year we have 25,430 taxable vehicles in the city. And this year our highest value vehicle is a Porsche, valued at over $125,000. Our most popular top 7, Honda Civic, Honda CRV, Honda Accord, Toyota Camry, Toyota Tacoma, Toyota Corolla, and Ford F-150. So this is the first year that we've had 2 trucks make it into that top list. Once again, we are Toyota friendly. So we have the most Toyotas in terms of brand, Toyota, then Ford, then Honda, Chevrolet, Subaru, Nissan, Hyundai, and it goes down from there. However, we are at this point up to 38 Teslas. I think I know where one of them came from. 28 Porsches and 15 Hummers. Our oldest taxable vehicle is still the 1920 Ford Model A. It actually has a 7-digit VIN number. The average median age of our cars and pickups in the city is a 2013 model, and we picked up 218 model year 2024 vehicles in this tax year. We have 700 motorcycles, and again, Harley-Davidson is the winner, with Honda coming in second, then Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki, and BMW. And my staff, who prepares this lovely report to you, would like to also note that that I bought a new car, so I'm giving more money into the, well, it's not a new car, it's new to me car. So they wanted you to know that I'm paying in more money this year.
Thank you.
Okay, and unless there's any questions.
Questions? Yeah.
Please
Okay.
thank our
Very
staff.
much.
So I'm
Yeah.
curious. Now I have got one question.
Sure,
The
you
Ford-
always do.
I know.
You're a
The
car
Ford Model
guy.
A, you said that's taxable. Is that because somebody actually drives that?
They do not have it registered with antique plates. The only
Okay.
way it's not taxable is if it had antique plates, which they do not choose to have. So it's still taxable.
So they're driving it with regular Virginia?
I don't think it's been out of the garage in many, many years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got one. That's the reason I know I don't, but
Right.
he does get out of the garage.
Yeah. You can still drive it with the antique plates. You just can't go on the interstate. But they choose not to have the antique plates. So it's still taxable.
Okay.
And don't ask me how we come up with the value for that.
I can give you a ballpark figure.
Okay, all set?
Yeah,
Thank you so much,
staff.
Maggie.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Yes.
staff, for us, Maggie. That's
Thank you, Maggie.
interesting.
Okay. So I will now entertain a motion.
Vice Mayor Darby. I move that a resolution as proposed be adopted establishing the Personal Property Tax Relief Act, PPTRA percentage at 33%.
Thank you, Counselor Woods. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Counselor Campbell, Mr. Kessiker.
Mr. Arrowood. Aye. Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Campbell.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Can I ask Maggie one more thing? Maggie, do you have an idea or is there, or when that tax may end up going bye-bye? If is it plan on being
You
there
know,
from
it, it gets the bill gets introduced every single year in the
okay.
General Assembly, and it's never passed through. So,
Okay.
you know, I think the governor had it on his agenda this year, but it didn't go anywhere.
Didn't go anywhere? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, moving right along, next item D, consideration of resolution directing the Planning Commission to consider amending the City of Staunton, Virginia Comprehensive Plan 2018 to 2040 by adding the West End Revitalization Strategies Plan as an addendum. Ms. Beauregard.
John Blair, City Attorney, will handle this item this evening.
Good evening, Vice Mayor Darby and Council. As you may recall, at your last meeting, you had a work session with the Planning Commission about the West End Revitalization Strategies Plan. And at the conclusion of that meeting, it seemed to be the will of council to proceed with having the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing about adding that particular document to the comprehensive plan. In order to effectuate that, there is a resolution before you that would direct the Planning Commission to hold that public hearing within 70 days of today. The reason for the 70-day timeline, which sounds a little odd, is that if conducted within that 70-day timeline, it would permit this city council at its December meeting to consider making this an addendum to the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Mr. Blair. Okay, is there any questions, council? No.
I'm
Okay,
curious.
so-
I am curious to know if there's been any public feedback on the plan since the draft was put on the city's website. It might be more of a.
I'll defer to Mr. Rhodes on that.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Council.
Evening, Mr. Rhodes.
To my knowledge, we've only received a couple inquiries, emails about the West End plan since that meeting last month. So very minimal. Of course, if you adopt this resolution, that would start the public review process. So although it's been on the city's website for a month or so, we would start the process and we would advertise for the public hearings for the Planning Commission at an upcoming meeting. And then at that time, I would expect to receive more input from the public.
Thank you.
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor,
Council Robertson?
Madam Vice Mayor, I move the council adopt the resolution as presented.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilor Airwood. Mr. Kesker, please call the roll.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Miss Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Miss Woods,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item on our agenda this evening is item E, consideration of request by William Lee Hereford to withdraw a 2.343 acre portion of 1350 Commerce Road from the Merrifield Agricultural Forestal District.
Tim Hartless will present this item this evening.
So, Mr. Hartless.
Well, thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Good evening, members of council.
Good evening.
This is a request by Dr. William Hereford to withdraw 2.343 acres of land from the Merrifield Agricultural Forestal District. The purpose of the withdrawal is to create a lot for the construction of a single-family home. Land within the ag districts should only be used for agricultural, forestal products or production. Single-family homes are permitted, but only for members of the immediate family or employees of the farm. The potential purchaser of this lot is not a member of the Hereford family, nor are they a member or an employee of the farm. So removal of the property from the district is required before a single-family home could be built. The district was created in 1997. It consists of approximately 562 acres of land. It was most recently renewed in 2020 for a 10-year period, so it will be eligible for renewal in 2030. The request to withdraw the property from the district was considered by the Staunton Agricultural Forestal Advisory Committee on June 26th, 2024. The committee noted in its report that Chapter 1895 of the Staunton City Code, which establishes the Ag 4 districts, does not give a purpose statement or a general description, which could help guide the committee in its deliberation. However, language in the Code of Virginia does lay out state policy that specifies considerations in establishing and maintaining Ag 4 districts. Virginia Code Section 15.24401 states that it is state policy to encourage localities of the Commonwealth to conserve and preserve and to encourage the development and improvement of their agricultural and forestal lands for the production of food and other agricultural and forestal products. It is also a state policy to encourage localities of the Commonwealth to conserve and protect agricultural and forestal lands as valued natural ecological resources, which provide essential open space for clean air sheds, watershed protection, wildlife habitat, aesthetic quality, and other environmental purposes. It is the purpose of this chapter to provide a means by which localities may protect and enhance agricultural and forestal lands of local significance as a viable segment of the local economy and as an important economical environmental resource. Staunton City Code Section 1895-0602 states that no land within the district shall be removed except with the approval of Staunton City Council upon the showing of good and reasonable cause. Neither the city code nor the Code of Virginia nor case law defines good and reasonable cause explicitly. It only says that good and reasonable cause cannot be arbitrary or capricious and cannot be willfully unreasonable. The general purpose of land use taxation in Virginia is to preserve agricultural, horticultural, forestry, and open space lands and to allow for the timely development of land. After deliberation, the committee on a 5-0 vote recommended denial of the applicant's request. Upon receiving notification of the committee's decision, Dr. Herford submitted a letter. In that letter, he lays out his reasons for why he believes his request meets that threshold for good and reasonable cause. He states in the letter that this specific part of the farm is so steep that it is not suitable for cropland nor for grazing of cattle, and that he has no longer used it for hay after a mishap that nearly resulted in a round bale rolling onto North Augusta Street. Again, this letter was submitted after the Ag 4 Advisory Committee had already made its recommendation, so it was new information that they were not able to consider. I'll note that the ag forest regulations are an overlay, and if this property is removed from the ag district overlay, it reverts back to the regulations of the underlying zoning, which in this case is R1 low density residential. At its August 15th meeting, the Planning Commission held a public hearing. No one spoke in opposition, and on a 4-0 vote, the commission unanimously voted to recommend approval of the request. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time. Dr. Herford is here with us tonight. This is not a public hearing, but it is a land use application, so I'm sure he would like to make some comments should you decide to permit him to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Hartless. Dr. Herford.
Yeah, my name's Lee Hereford, 1350 Commerce Road. I know this isn't a public hearing, but they mentioned they wanted me to speak on this, and I'm kind of pretty casual with it. This started actually over a year ago when Mr. Santos, you know, can be pretty perseverant, asked about purchasing land. My initial response was absolutely not, because I wasn't going to sell it off in the pasture, and usually people inquire about the very top views, and And he kept asking about it, and I finally said, which piece are you talking about? And he mentioned the very corner part that I term the trash piece of the property, because it's gotten a place that I can't get the guys to bush hog it. They've kind of abandoned a lot of that, and it was always the place I hated trying to mow when I did, because it was just so it would draw you into the big ravines. So he was inquiring about it for some special reason, and I finally considered I would talk to him. It took 6 months to negotiate it back and forth. And finally, after he took me up there one day and I looked up, and I never had even noticed the view in 30 years. He said, this is why I wanted it. I said, well, this is why I hate it, because it's so steep. I'm always looking down, trying to manage the equipment. It's a piece of property that borders the right of way. People say, why didn't you back it up right next to the Baldwin Place development? Well, there's I think a 50-foot right of way for a power line that runs there, which would do him no good. He couldn't use it. And then there's about a 50 or 60-foot swath there that's a ravine that's at least 40 or 50 feet deep in there. And of course, he didn't want that. He said I could take part of it. He didn't want it. So we snugged it up right next to it, to be able to go ahead and make some useful meaning of this property. Because I wanted to actually fence out these woods to keep my cows out. It's a very difficult place to check when they're calving down in that ravine in the woods, especially in the wintertime. And the way we work the lot out, it lets me bevel it off and can run a fence up to the fence at the top and completely fence them out of that part of the woods. So I finally consented to him after a year. We kind of worked out a deal on the survey and where it would need to go to make my fields more manageable too. And so we've gone through the process of withdrawal process up these steps. I was not there at the first meeting because it was told I didn't need to be there. And but the second meeting, we kind of explained to him the reason why we chose this piece of property, only for the reason that it was, like I said, I kind of always call it the trash piece of property. And I don't believe in selling land, but I thought that piece could maybe be let go to straighten the farm out. And part of the reasoning for the withdrawal is the qualification withdrawal is a good and reasonable cause for doing this. And we're not right in the middle of a whole field. We're just tucked over at the edge to try to make this land useful, develop a house that can improve the property taxes for the city. My legal counsel, Mr. Boyce, is here today. If you have any questions, we've worked this contract out over a year with regulations about height and visibility and what can be used on. It's pretty strict. It's not costing the city anything because there's no public services there. He's having to provide his own services, water, septic systems, and so forth, which I believe have been approved already. And so he's also talking about building a very nice quality home consistent with Baldwin Acres. So it would flow quite well with that. And again, it's just a little part tucked, 2.3 acres tucked over in the corner in that area. So appealing request from the council to approve, as the planning commission did, that we could withdraw just this part, you know, of the Ag Forest District. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you,
Lee.
much.
Appreciate it.
Council.
First off, I just had a question for you, Dr. Herford. Thank you for being here. What kind of farming do you do on your farm?
Beef cattle
Oh, beef
primarily.
cattle.
We've got some horses, but they're more for just pleasure riding, but it's beef cattle operation, cow-calf.
I have a question about other reasons for taking land out of the district. It may be for Mr. Blair, but when I was reading the application, it's a very short application, and I didn't see the reason. And we are supposed to make a decision based on, you know, a good and reasonable reason. And there wasn't one on an application.
Right,
So
right.
later a letter came in saying it was no longer farmable.
Right.
Now, I'm just wondering, would there be any other reasons for taking a parcel out or selling off another piece of property? I hear what you're saying, but I was just curious about the process here.
And I think the reason we discovered the reason for the initial application is I filled it out. Tim Hartless and I discussed it. There was nowhere to put what is the reason you're pulling it out. You know, pulling it out of it. Just what are you doing? What are you doing? Different. And I think somebody commented said this was for application to put land in the conservation, you know, the Merrifield conservation or the conservation program, but not, they really haven't developed a thing for pulling it out yet. But.
And then I just, thank you. And then I read that and I saw why the explanation why it would no longer be farming, good for your cattle, but wondering if it is necessary to take land out that is no longer farmable or used for agriculture.
I'm sorry,
You understand my question? If you find,
I don't have my hearing aids.
Oh, if you find that a piece of property or a parcel in your property is no longer farmable, are you required to take it out? I suppose is my
And I
question.
don't think so. And the only reason I did this was it was over so far to the side. You know, I've had people in years past want this part, want this part. I said, no, I'm not doing that. It's in the middle of a field. It would be a major hindrance for me. I want to keep everything together. And like I say, when he chose this piece, I didn't realize he was choosing it for the view primarily because I was like, why do you want this? But again, it was a place that I've just got to the point it's very difficult to farm over there, almost impossible. I call it marginal land. Soil wasn't of great quality. And the way it transitions up there, it draws you down with a piece of farm equipment into that ravine. So you're constantly trying to fight not to get into it. So when he mentioned that, I thought, well, I could consider that part because that's always been the sore spot on the farm. So,
Yeah.
but again, the only reason because it's right on the edge. I tried to parallel the borders up and smooth things out on my field. He wanted to take out like a block. I said, no, you can't do that. I need bevel corners, smooth corners transition for equipment to move around it. I can't get around 90-degree angles.
No, I hear you.
So with doing that, it's allowing me to go ahead and proceed with the fence, to fence that off to the west, to the fence on the west to the top that will actually keep the cattle out of that. It'd still be, I guess, an ag forest district, but it just will let the cattle be better for calving and not be going down in those woods so bad. There's not even new, somebody mentioned, is there good timber there? It was logged over evidently years ago. It's been logged over again. And what is that? I call it trash. The whole farm is like this trash timber for the most part.
Right.
It's just, it needs to be, if you're going to do anything, reforest it, just take it out, bulldoze it and reforest it. But I don't want to go into all that either.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was getting at, is that if a property is no longer usable as farmland, pasture land for animals, is there a point at which it must be taken out of the district?
Not must. But
No, I don't.
Right.
No,
It's
it's
not part of
repairable
the,
every 10 years.
Yeah.
so you would have to wait until 2030 to say this is no longer.
But there's a certification each
Let
year,
me-
correct?
Let me offer a little perspective here. In terms of, do you have to remove it from the ag forestal district?
Mhm.
No, there's a recertification process every 10 years. However, it is also important to understand that the question before you is about the ag forestal district. But I think what you're maybe asking, and I don't know if Councilor Campbell was talking about, there's also a tax treatment that goes with this. And I know we've got the assessor here, but yes, I think if at a certain point land was not used for one of the objectives that receives that special tax assessment, then yes, the assessor might remove the land. And I think the landowner has to make a certification that the land is being used for those purposes. So if the land was not being used for those purposes, I think there's an expectation that the owner would not certify that it's being used for that.
Right.
And also the assessor has to make determinations as well at times.
And that wouldn't be till 2030 then.
No,
Again,
no. Again, there's two issues here.
Sorry.
So you're saying it could stay in the overlay, but each year you have to certify from a tax standpoint which areas are getting the tax benefit.
Right. And remember, our overlay is a little odd in the sense that we call it an ag forestal district and has this 10-year recertification process for the entire district, right? And so it is important to understand, right? There are two recertification processes. There's the district every 10 years, and then the parcel, which is a yearly certification for the tax treaty. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question? So if it were prime farmland that, was being used, there would be no good and reasonable purpose for taking it out. I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
It depends on your interpretation.
What that is, and it's the
I fall on the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not that I'm a farmer. I'm not by any means, stretch of means, but I've got several good farming friends. And I'm sure Dr. Hereford can tell you, when cows are calving, they will go and find the most godly, unearthly place to drop a calf. I mean, right in the middle of a stream of all places. And it's bad trying to get them out. But then I fall on the other side, and maybe this is the wrong thing. The reason that he can withdraw it, anything he wants to, it's his property. That's just the way I feel about it. But that's.
Yeah, I hear
Yeah,
you, Mark, but
it's, I know, no, I'm just
I'm
saying.
trying to
that's-
go
I'm-
by
No,
the code.
I understand
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I understand the code, but I'm simply saying I fall more on the sense that it's his property. He could do what he wants to do with it.
Yes, but it's also in an agricultural district, so
I don't care.
Okay, I'm not fighting with you, Mark, I'm just
I know,
saying.
darling.
I find,
I was just asking questions, so.
in these
Thank you.
situations, I end up wanting to fall back to the code and,
I
and
know.
try to dig in for, guidance on it. But this one is an exercise in
Yeah, it's just-
frustration
it
because
is
it goes on and on about, preservation of our farmlands and forest, barriers. And then it says, and also for timely development
Yeah.
at the end, which is just like just kidding. You're right in there. So you're like, oh my God. And then, good and reasonable. And then you turn the page thinking they're going to define that and there's nothing else. They've moved on. So it's left up entirely, to us. And, in this case, we're the tiebreaker, in a way. But it's, I tend to go with, on these, what the landowner wants to do on it. And it feels kind of a, if
It feels good.
either way, but
in
it's
my
also
point of
it's
view,
such a vague code. Ugh.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
this goes
yeah.
back to a little bit too of, and I know that talk that I gave last week. I mean, Staunton is landlocked. I mean, we are landlocked, and if we don't find a way to grow, then we don't get taxes. We don't grow and do the things that we need to do. We don't get the money down the road to do something with Uniontown. There's just so many. You got to grow in this city. Otherwise, you just sit there and paddle water.
So Dr.
I was just
Herford,
focusing on his question.
I
I hear you.
I just
I want to
have-
grow too.
Counselor
I
Woods
just
has
have
a
one.
question.
Is there any, with that piece of property, is there any more of your land leading from that property that is the same as the one that you're asking to?
Not really. That was the question of the planning commission, because at the very top of that lot, where it kind of bevels off, it actually levels off. And that's always been one of the better places to make hay up there. And so that property is very good. And then from all the way up the top is good. But I used to have to make bales and try to carry them all the way to the top of the hill to put them out, or all the way to the bottom. But that part was just, that's why I couldn't figure out why he wanted that piece. It's like that, to me, that was the most undesirable piece. And when he mentioned it, that's the only reason I conceded to talk to him. I said, that piece? And then, of course, about 8 months later, I was up there with him and he raised his arms up and showed me. And I finally looked up and I said, oh, I see what you say. It's the view is what he's paying for. And at that point, I conceded to go ahead and consider dividing that little piece off. And of course, it's just a small, very small piece of the whole farm on the very perimeter of it. But no, the land is good above it. It's very good. And so.
So as city council liaison to the planning commission, I was there for the discussion, and it was a long discussion. The planning commission discussed it for, I would say, almost an hour, and they went back and forth and asked a lot of these similar questions. So one thing, considering that discussion, the additional information at hand, and hearing from citizens that also live in the Ag Forest Overlay District, it's very clear that this is not clear. And there are many opportunities that I think we need to work on as a city to define what expectations are, and even charge our Ag Forest Committee to let's develop a city definition of what is good and reasonable, some type of guidelines that can be used in decision-making for future considerations. Because we're only going to be in the same point going forward. Being at the Planning Commission and looking at this and thinking about it considerably, I got to be honest, I am conflicted. The land use planner in me certainly doesn't want to see that whole area of the city develop into large lot homes on ridge lines, because I don't think that's the highest and best use of the property in the future. But given the characteristics of this specific site, I think it probably is the best use of the site, is a home site at the top of the ridge. Again, you referred to this as the trash piece of the property, and talking about the ravine also. One side of me would like to see a complete cutout of everything that you consider to be the trash piece from the Ag Forest Overlay. But per the state code for Ag Forest Overlay, there's talks about benefits of resource protection and open space. So on that hand, I like just the 2 acre carve out for the house and that we're protecting the ravines. So I'm back and forth on this from a pure use standpoint. I can support it, but like I said, there's significant opportunities for us as a city to develop guidelines going forward to make this an easier decision and a clearer decision for the property owners in the ag forest overlay moving forward as well.
I think it's fair to the
I
other
agree.
property owners within the district as
Yeah.
well, because, you know, this is new territory for us. I think in the, what is it, 27 years the district has been around. This is the second time, I guess, it's been. And
it's odd to have an ag forestal district in a
in a city, yeah.
Yeah.
to begin
So there's a
lot
lot of.
We gotta be one of
oddness.
the few.
One of the very few that do.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are.
So.
Yeah, well,
thank
luckily
you,
we have a
Council.
comprehensive plan review coming up.
Yeah,
think
I mean,
so.
we're kicking off next month or next week for our first comp plan update committee, and that's definitely a topic that I think needs to be addressed and looked at.
Yeah.
Well,
We do this
thank you for
squishy.
your comments, for everyone. In this particular issue and hearing it all, I tend to agree that, you know, this is a situation where we have a property owner who is saying, I understand, you know, what all goes with asking for a withdrawal of this. And I feel like that's something that he has a right to do, and I support that. So, is there any other questions or anything that anybody else wants to say at this point?
And that we understand that part, but it's also, you know, we put things in place so that it will work for us, you know, so that we have the advisory committee and then we have the planning committee. So we have steps to go through this. So we don't want to make it where we can skip over steps.
No, I don't think we should skip
So
over
that
steps.
is one thing that, you know, another thing that we need to look at, that this is why we put the committee in place. That's why it was established, to hash this out and give us recommendations. And when you bypass a step, that's just like, you know, you just stepping over one going to the other. So we don't want that happening. So that would be a good way to make sure that we establish something for the future, because this is only going to continue.
Well, like I say, in this case, the planning commission did. I mean,
They did.
They did unanimously, so.
And ultimately, the ag force, they did their due diligence and presented their recommendation. Planning did theirs, presented theirs, but it falls solely on this council to, you know, determine whether we're going to allow this to happen or not, just like it would any further. I think all the things that's been mentioned are good as far as, you know, making some additions and changes and some clear guidelines
Right.
moving forward. But
Yes.
it is something that obviously we have to deal with at this time. So having said that, are you all ready to have a motion on this?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I move that council approve the withdrawal as recommended by the planning commission.
Thank you, Counselor Robertson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Counselor Edward. Mr. Ketzger, please call for the vote.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Miss Edwards,
Aye.
Miss Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Council. Okay. The next thing that we have on our agenda this evening is item F, appointment of the City of Staunton Fire Chief, Ms. Beauregard.
I'll just be brief with a quick background on this. I'm pleased tonight to present to City Council and the community my recommendation for the new fire chief for the City of Staunton. And just as background, Staunton City Council, City Code requires that City Council formally appoint the chief. And this can be done with a simple motion, which is on the agenda for this evening. I will just say the applicant pool was competitive, and we made sure to include input from the fire department staff at all stages of the process. And on that note, I am pleased to recommend to City Council that Jason Ball be named the next fire chief for the City of Staunton.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beauregard. Council, you've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion?
Madam Vice Mayor, I move to appoint Jason Ball as the new fire chief for the City of Staunton Fire Department.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion that's been seconded. Mr. Kessicker, please call the roll.
Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood.
Aye.
Mr. Campbell.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. We are now finished with our regular items on the agenda, but we will move to matters from the city manager.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms.
I have
Beauregard.
yes, I have a few items this evening. First of all, you're going to start seeing work along West Beverly Street, which actually has begun the sidewalk improvements. And that work will continue into the fall. And this work is part of the West Beverly Street sidewalk improvements and the VDOT repaving project. So that's very exciting. If you've driven by the JDR District Court building, you've seen quite a few changes. Demolition is complete. All buildings are removed down to the slab. The water line and stormwater site work is complete. Foundations are complete with masonry work on the stair towers and elevator shafts, which is ongoing. That work is ongoing. The first section, or the west half of concrete floor slab, was placed yesterday, and the remainder of the first floor slab is scheduled to be placed on September 24th. The steel erection is scheduled to start the last week in October. And finally, the project is ahead of schedule and on budget. So all very exciting. In other exciting news, the Finance Department has been awarded yet again the GFOA Budget Presentation Award for the FY25 budget document. And I'd like to especially recognize Ms. Myers and her staff when she's here in a couple presentations, but I'll just talk about the award. This award represents a significant achievement and reflects the commitment of the governing body and staff to meeting the highest principles of governmental budgeting. And in order to receive the award, you have to satisfy 4 guidelines. It has to be a good policy document, a financial plan, an operations guide, and a communications device. And the budget documents must be rated proficient in all of those 4 categories and in the 14 mandatory criteria within those categories. There are over 1,700 participants in the budget award programs. So I wish to congratulate Ms. Myers and her staff, but I'd like to recognize them again in 2 weeks also. And then finally, the city has entered into a contract with the Timmons Group to complete a physical survey of the Uniontown community. This project is one of the action items in the Uniontown Neighborhood Action Plan. The work is expected to be completed by the end of this calendar year. And the survey work is a critical first step in designing the water and sewer infrastructure. And that's all I have this evening. Thank you.
That's good stuff. So thank you very much, Ms. Beauregard. Okay. Moving along, the last thing this evening is matters from the public. So we've now come to a portion of our meeting called Matters from the Public. I will read the rules for Matters from the Public. This part of City Council's agenda is entitled Matters from the Public. It is the time that council sets aside to hear from citizens and others about a wide variety of subjects. A copy of the Staunton City Council's Matters from the Public rules are available in paper form at the clerk's desk and online on the City of Staunton's webpage. You're asked to familiarize yourself with those rules before commenting. Please come to the podium or begin your call, identify yourself, and complete your remarks within the 5 minutes. So, do we have anyone that would like to come speak tonight? Come on up.
Good evening, Madam Vice Mayor. Thank you, Council, for letting me have a moment to speak with you. My name is Joshua North. I am a parent of 2 children at McSwain Elementary. During our PTA meeting, we were discussing a matter that's been of concern to the different parents there at McSwain. There on North Coulter Road, right there at Jordan Street, there is a crosswalk that has been, from my understanding, they have not had a safety crossing guard for this school year so far. And in the meantime, occasionally there's a police officer there, but also the principal, Miss Crocker, will fill in that role as well. One of the things that I witness as a parent who drops off their kid as a car rider is that there are a significant number of motorists that ignore the crosswalk. Even last year, whenever there was a crossing guard, I witnessed several times motorists just ignoring the crosswalk, ignoring the blinking yellow lights there, and as well as just ignoring the crossing guard. In a matter of times, he's slapped a couple of cars also. What I would like to do is just bring this matter to your attention, both there at the intersection of North Coulter and Jordan Street, as well as Taylor Street and North Coulter Street there for the high school. My wife recognized and witnessed some 3 cars drive through that just this afternoon while children were present in the crosswalk. So I would like to bring it up to the council's attention to make sure to see this is addressed, to see if there's increased police presence to be able to hopefully deter motorists from ignoring the crosswalks, ignoring the safety matters in place, and hopefully just keep the children's safety in mind as we move forward through the school year. This is something that is, of course, with my 10-year-old here, very, of great concern to me. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Ms. Beauregard, I'm sure you're taking notes of that. I see our police chief back there, so. Okay. Oh,
Council Vice Mayor Constance Birch, 319 Mary Gray Lane. I think it's very important and very special that Staunton has an ag forestal region. I always think of Bell's Lane when that's mentioned, but evidently there are others. And I'm just hoping going forward, when we talk about growing Staunton, that we don't want to take land from the ag forestal. Farms and open land are very important for the environment, and they require much less in services than the taxes that one would come to the city if we build houses. Houses mean children generally, they mean services. And it's so some people worry or are concerned that ag forest doesn't bring in its fair share of taxes. We have to counter that with, one, the environmental contributions and the fact that they don't require services. So I hope that as you concern, I don't know why, personally, why we're concerned about Staunton growing. I think Staunton's great. Thank you.
thank you very much. Mr. Kesker, do we have anyone online?
No, ma'am, I have no one with their hands raised.
Folks, is there anyone else that would like to address council this evening?
Actually, Madam Vice Mayor, we just had a hand go up.
Okay. Caller, you can go ahead.
Hi, my name is Zach Lewis. I live at 904 Rockaway Street. I'm glad to see you all are finally doing something about Uniontown as far as the surveys. Of course, we were told it was going to be done in the summer. Then we were told it was going to be done in late summer. But I guess before 2025 gets in, we'll get some properties surveyed out there. I sent a message to I guess, Mr. Rhodes' department, to an individual there. I sent an email to him and I never got a response back from him. It's been over a month. So thank you for doing something.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Do you have any other callers, Mr. Kesker?
No, ma'am, I have no one with their hand raised.
Okay. Hearing no further matters from the public at this time, I call this meeting adjourned.